Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 7 in the discourse Shlach Lecha Anashim, which is the 5th discourse in B'Shasha Hekdimu in the great book, B'Shasha Hekdimu 5672. We are holding the middle of chapter 19. And here we go. I think this is the second class in chapter 19. All right, so the idea which he's beginning to explain over here is the idea to understand. He began with the question to understand what kind of tzimtzum, what kind of a contraction would we need, or that not just would need, but actually happened in the tzimtzum arishon, in the first tzimtzum, in the first contraction, that separated or that enabled the light of the kav to come forth. We learned that tzimtzum relates to the Or Ein Sof that was originally present differently regarding the element of the Or Ein Sof that's not the source of the kav. Over there it needed to be a total blackout. But regarding the element of the Or Ein Sof, which is considered Shayrish Umakar HaKav, which is considered the source of the Kav, which he identified earlier is the Esa Spheres Agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres. Regarding that, he says it was enough. These were the last words in chapter 18. It was enough that there should be, at least in the Kitzer, he uses the word. It was enough that it was a tzimtzum b'derech miyut. Miyut meaning a diminishment, but not a complete removal. Not versus, there's two types of tzimtzum. One is called b'derech siluk. Siluk means a removal of everything, and miyut means just a reduction. That regarding this, it was enough a reduction. So to understand that element, what kind of reduction are we talking about? What does this mean? So he began to explore, what does it even mean that there is 10 hidden spheres within the Or Ein Sof? And what kind of an existence are they? How do they exist when they are in the Or Ein Sof? We definitely can't say that there are 10 specified spheros over there, and each one is differentiatable from the other. Says in the Or Ein Sof, that cannot be. There's definitely, as he said, the words can't be that that it is adding a riboy, it is adding a multiplicity, and he said earlier, Shum riboy chas v'shalom ba'Or Ein Sof baruch hu. It's not adding a riboy, and he gave the example of the soul. The soul, before the soul lands in the body and begins to unpack its powers into the various different vessels, when the soul contains all these powers within the soul itself, the soul definitely carries within it the emotional powers and the intellectual powers. But as they exist in the soul is one singular essence. The soul is not a composite of a whole bunch of pieces put together. The soul is not a puzzle made up of pieces. The soul is a singular being, and it has within it all the powers, and somehow these powers exist in a way where there are not many in him. It's all one part of the soul. On the one hand, we don't want to say it doesn't exist, because that would be the higher level of the Or Ein Sof, where everything is possible, but nothing, it's not considered yet 10 spheres. That's what we spoke, spheres ein kate. That's like a yecholes, that's like a capability, but not a koach, not a power. Here we're talking specifically that there is already a koach. There is a power of the 10 spheres. So they exist, but then if they exist, how is it they exist without adding anything to him? And more than that, how are they totally one? In meaning that they are all unified, betachlis ha'achdos, they're totally in a state of his arvus v'his achdos. That was the lashon, I think. She'ein b'hem ischalkos li'yah, because they're all in a state, what did he say? Okay, yeah, they don't have a division. That Chachma should be on its own, and Sphira and Bina would be on its own. And the reason is, as he explained, was because in essence, they're not in a state of existence. They are, but they're not in existence. When something is in existence, then each thing has its own presence, its own being, its own parameters, so to speak, and occupies its own space, and that creates differentiation. But because they're not in a state of mitzius, that's why they just are all they're all, there's no ischalkus, there's no division. And what he says is, and with the last words we were learning, let's read over this. Let's go back to the print of the 3 books. The Shoshak Dimo has various different prints. The one that I'm usually using when I'm teaching is not the last print, although I have that as well. That's really good because that gives you all the Mara Makaimis, all the places to look things up. But I'm using the second print, which is 3 large blue volumes. So in that book, this is on the last line of page Chavtes. To understand this, how is it that there is 10 spheres over there? If they exist, these 10 spheres, then there is over there madreges hafechem. Then there is opposites, like kindness and severity, because the 10 spheres incorporate opposite types of energies, kindness and discipline, which are like fire and water. And the same is also chachma and bina, which, although they are in a higher state, they also, to a certain degree, reflect the element of water. Because I explained a lot of places in Chassidus that Chachma is watery. That's why the physical side of the brain, the right side of the brain, is more moist and cool, and the left side of the brain is has a fire, more domineering fire element to it, because the power of Bina, the spiritual power of Bina, is more related to Gevura. That's why it dissects things, it breaks things down to the particles, same like fire does. That's why the physical brain of the left side of the brain is dry and moist. Dry and hot, and hotter on the left side. So you see that even a Chachma and Bina, these are 2 opposites. And yet over here we're saying that in the soul itself, they're all sitting literally together with each other, and there's no differentiation. But yet they're there. Now, this is actually where we were holding. Now one can, he wants to make the question even stronger. You might say that maybe they're existing in a very weak state. And since it's the beginning of something, it's very weak. He says, no, the beginning of something is not weak. The beginning of something is its full strength. When something develops, it gets a little bit diffused. It gets a little bit... Whenever a thing goes forth into illumination and into expression, there is a weakening of it. The essence of it, the beginning of it, which is the essence of it, is really the most potent, the most potent power of it. That's like the moment a person, I don't want to say a negative thing, but that's what is coming to my mind. The moment you have already an expressed cold, the germ is already weaker. It's not so catchy like the day before the cold comes into expression. You're not feeling so much the symptoms, but then the essence, God forbid, of the virus is still like it's there in its full potency, and that's the negative. Hopefully, there's a million. The essence of something has a tkifus, has a power, so much more. You find it now in Oneshama. The essence of the soul, as we learn, is the power of Mashiach in the soul, and over there is rock solid. Nothing can budge it. Nothing can change it. The Alter Rebbe explains that the Yechida, that's where Mesiras Nefesh comes from. That's where we don't, there's nothing that can ever nothing can ever cause us to become disconnected, because that's essence. Once there is already, you step away from essence and you come to expression and revelation, which we call light, then it gets weaker already. So now the question would be as follows. In the soul itself, the powers that are in the soul, or the kochos of the esespheres as they are in the Orient Sof, but the same would be the powers of our soul as they are in the soul itself. That's where the essence is, because we're dealing with the soul itself, which is the essence of the soul, not the expressed version as the soul is expressing itself, either above the body, or for sure when the soul is expressing itself into the body. So then it gets already diffused, it gets already weaker in the state of expression. So if we say that these powers are different than each other, and sometimes their differences are so strong that they can't tolerate each other, and like fire and water, which one extinguishes the other, so the essence of the fire and the essence of the water should be more in conflict and more intolerable, and therefore being mutually exclusive and not be able to live one with the other. How is it that we're saying that even though these powers are in their essential point, yet they all live in perfect harmony with each other? They're not in conflict. They all sit together in the soul. That's his question. And in truth, every koach, when it is of essence, it is even much stronger. The Eichem, so how can we say the Eichem Klulim? How can they be incorporated b'chinas iruv in a state of mixture, vis achdus and unification? Zem one with the other. Quite on the contrary, the atzmius of it, the essence of it, should make it more betaikif, more stronger, and therefore more intolerable of the other koach, of the other power. He says the answer to that is in truth, it's beyond our grasp. How the kochos, to say that their kochos are there, it's not like they're not there. You say, okay, the nefesh itself, the soul itself is prior, is higher than its kochos. And in this level of soul itself, there are no kochos. The kochos are born outside of the soul. If we would argue that, okay, fine. Once it's outside, then it's outside. But he's not accepting that. That's not true. The kochos, the powers, begin in the soul itself. The soul powers begin in the soul itself. And that's their essence. But yet, all there is just the pure soul, which means there's the soul powers are all there, but they're not in contradiction to each other. They're all totally together. It's not like on the right side of the soul lies this power, and on the left soul there's no differentiation of right and left and up and down and this space and this. In the body, you have all these spatial elements, and you can say this program takes place over here, and this power and this program is being run from this headquarters, two different parts of the body, but that's not in the soul itself. So therefore, he says it's above our understanding. But but he says even though we can't understand it, we can still feel it. This is apparent, v'nirgash, and it is sensed in the chusha seichel. That means even though we can't necessarily give sophisticated explanations to it, but the mind senses that that's the way it is. Shehein sham b'sachtos, that in the soul itself, all the powers are unified. Now I'm going to skip now for a moment because he's going to do a parenthesis over here, and we're going to end that. And it's a beautiful piece, but let's leave that probably for tomorrow because I want to finish the thought. Finish the thought, and then we'll come back to fill in the blanks. Shaharei. Now, what's the proof that they are actually in a state of unification? Maybe not. Maybe in the soul itself or in the Ein Sof itself, although it is a source for all these powers. So it's just like we said earlier, that there's a level in the Ein Sof where there is above the 10 spheres, Haknuzais. It's above that those 10 hidden spheres. Then there is a lower level where the 10 spheres exist. So you see already we're saying within the soul itself, there is a place where they don't exist and a place where they do exist. So why can't we say that within the place that they exist, each one occupies its own space? Yeah, in a very, very, very subtle and benign way, but yet each one occupies its own space. So he proves Shahadeh. So this is after the parentheses, about 10 lines of, it's getting closer to the middle of the page. And the proof to that is like this. Basically, let me say first what the proof is. The proof is that he's going to prove that even here we're talking about the Orein self, that's before the tzimtzum, before the contraction. We know, again, from all of everybody that's joining us over here is already by now a big certified Kabbalist. We've already learned in the earlier classes that after the tzimtzum, after the contraction, there's lots of levels. Until we get to the 10 spheres of Atzilos, there's many levels. Remember, we learned there's a level called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. And then there's a level called Olam HaNekudim, the world of Nekudim, the world of spots. And then we learned that there's a level called Olam HaKudim, which means a ringed world. And then we learned Olam HaNekudim, a world of spots. So there's various levels and levels and levels. Now, even in those levels, which are after the Tzimtzum, even there we mentioned that the 10 spheros are all existing in a non-differentiatable way. Remember we said they're all in one vessel. And even in Adam Kadmon, there isn't even any vessels. It's like beyond even vessels. Or that the vessels are there, but the vessels are not even noticed, so it's like no vessels. It's all just one. So what he's deriving is, what he's saying is like this. If and after the Tzimtzum, which is way, 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 incomparably lower, because the Tzimtzum, if you remember, is a total cutaway from the Orein Sof. So if after the Tzimtzum, even there we make the argument that the kochos, the powers of the spheros, are all unified in one vessel, which means they're resting in the same place, then definitely before the Tzimtzum we can't place them in different parts of the Orein Sof before the Tzimtzum and whatever that would mean. You can't do that. Sharei, because proof, Sharei Gam b'pchenas Adam b'pchenas Ak, which stands for Adam Kadmon, even in the level of primordial man. Which over there's already a certain shape and a form, whatever that means, primordial man. We're giving it a name already. The Gam b'pchenas Akudim, and even lower than Adam Kadmon, and the level of Akudim, which is where it's called ringed, whatever that means, a type of ring, a type of a circle. Over there we say that all the spheres are all, there is already a vessel. In Adam Kadmon you don't sense any vessels. In the world of Akudim you sense a vessel, but all you sense is one vessel. And all the spheres, all the energies are in one vessel. For Kolshkin, so how much more so? But in the Orin before the Tzimtzum, of course, they're all perfectly one with each other. So what's the main answer? And the main answer is because they are not in a state of Metzius. That's the answer. The reason they can all be, even though they're opposites, this is fire and this is water, kindness and even though they're opposites, but their existence at this point is not in a state of an existence and not in a state of a being. Again, when we're going to learn the parentheses tomorrow, Be'ezras Hashem, we can get a better understanding. I just want to give a little bit more of an outline as we're going to learn. So now, I'm going to skip again. He's another parentheses, two major parentheses that we're skipping, just to keep the outline. So we owe two parentheses to come back to, but we go down further a couple of lines. And the mashal for this idea that that there is a state where the sphirot, the attributes, are not in a state of mitzius, they're not in a state of beingness, so they exist in a non-being manner, and in that state, they're not in conflict with each other. Let's see. The example and the metaphor for that is Yedua is known mekochos hanefesh, from the powers of the soul. Shebevadai, he says we're going to use our own soul as a power, as a illustration or as an example to understand how it all is in the super soul, how it is in God. It is no mekochos hanefesh, from the powers of the soul. Shebevadai, definitely nimtzam klulim be'etzem hanefesh. All the kochos hanefesh are found in the essence of the soul. And over there they all dwell together. This is not really an explanation so far. All this is he finds the same idea and he's pointing it to as though we shouldn't be so awed by the fact that so it is by God, because so it is by each and every one of us. That in our soul itself, all the powers are there. But the kamoi shehem is galos. When the powers come out into an expressed form, when the powers come out of the soul and they go into expression, every koach has its own vessel. The power of chachma, the power of creativity, the power of the chachma, which is where the creative thinking happens, the flash, the initiation of an idea, the birth of an idea. That power of chachma, that has, as we spoke earlier, that sits in the right side of the brain. That's in the moach, in the physical brain, on the right side of the brain, which is a special facility for chachma. Chachma operation takes place on that side of the brain. Koyach bina, and the power of bina, bina, sits on the other side of the brain, in the moach, in the brain of bina, which means each one is in its own environment. Viriya ba'ayin, and the power of vision takes place not anywhere else in the body other than in the eye. The eye is where the sole power of vision manifests in the eye. But we see that when all these powers are in the soul itself, when they are in the soul itself, they sit and they dwell. They dwell, all of them together, and they're not in conflict with each other. Even though they are separate powers. How do you know they're separate powers? Because eventually, when they will come out, they will be so different one from each other. One of them is fiery, like the power of discipline. And this is water. Imagine the person has a capacity to feel tremendous kindness and love to someone, and you also have within your soul the power to feel such rage and anger. Two opposite feelings. And they're sitting, and they're all, it's the same you, same person, same soul. So, then you have to say these powers are there. And when they will come out, they have such a different flavor. One is burning fire, and one is refreshing, delicious water. Zelle b'chenas eish. This is fire, and this is water. Nevertheless, in the soul itself, these powers all are one. And this is the line. This is the explanation. Because when they exist in the soul itself, they exist in the epitome of refinement. Hazakus means of elegance, of refinement, of subtlety. They are at the epitome of subtlety. And ruchnius and spiritual. And the difference between spiritual and physical is that physical matter is something. It's something. It occupies space. It pronounces itself. It's very much very, very loud in its beingness, in its existence. The more spiritual something is, the more refined and elegant and non-aggressive in the sense, in its presence. Doesn't mean that it's not strong. It can be super strong, but it's not asserting itself. It can be silent. It can be completely, to be present, but be invisible at the same time. As he says, they're in a state, when all these powers are in the essence of the soul, they're in a state of the epitome of zakus in Yiddish. The best word for zakus in Yiddish is edelkeit. They're in the epitome of refinement, varuchnius and spirituality, and spiritual. Loi minei umiktsasei, not in any way or even tiny bit, klal at all, mekomoshe and achakach. From the way they appear to be once they emerge out of their soul itself and come into manifestation and expression, they come with a powerful self-assertion, with a powerful presence of existence, of somethingness. And in that somethingness, that's when their features and dominance of their own space, not to allow anything else in, becomes highlighted. Not in any way when they come into revelation. And when they are in that state, they're not even noticeable. They're so silent, they're so invisible, they're so hidden. And that's why they all sit beautifully together. And the same is also, Reuven will understand the inyan esa spherois regarding the 10 spherois. The im hayois. Now this is the way it is regarding our powers of our soul. And the same will also be understood regarding the 10 spherois above. The im hayois, even though the bislapshusam bekalim, when they become enclosed in vessels, they are very much in a state of chesed and gevura, very much in a state of kindness and severity. Muvdolim zemizeh, separated one from each other. Makol makayim, nevertheless. When they are included, when they are still absorbed in the Orein Sof, they are in the epitome of dakos. He uses an interesting different. Earlier he used the word zakos, and here he uses the word dakos. Zakos means, as we said earlier, edel, and dakos means fine. They are in the epitome of fineness. And varuchnius, but the other word he does use the same as he used before, and ruchnius, and spiritual. But how much more spiritual? Le'en kates, without an end, mikamosh and achakach, from the way they are afterwards. And now when we say afterwards, we're talking about sphirot and attributes that manifest in Atzilus. And the world of Atzilus is so high, so refined. But compared to Orin self before the Tzimtzum, Atzilus is like the Alter Rebbe says in many places, like Asiya Gufnis. It's like a physical action. So notwithstanding its complete, utter, incomprehensible refinement, it's considered coarse and dense in compare to these very powers. The oirais, here we're talking about the lights of the Eser Spheres, when they are in their source, in the Orin Sof, in the level of Eser Spheres Hagnuzais, as we discussed earlier, they are in such a tachlis haruchneus and spirituality, and therefore non-presence of self, that they're not detectable at all. And therefore, and that's why there's no division at all of each bechina, of each element on its own. They're all unified completely as one. That's the teaching. Now we're going to go back, Be'ezus Hashem, to fill in the parenthesis, Be'ezus Hashem. But let's leave this. I just wanted to get the reading, the essence of the idea, and then in the parentheses we're going to get a better grasp on it, Be'ezus Hashem, in tomorrow's class. Meanwhile, let's see Moshiach here today.